I still remember this experience vividly, even though it happened to me back in 2006. At the time, I thought that was it. It was one of those moments where you think to yourself, is this actually happening? Am I going to get out of this? And it will be a moment that will always stick with me. I was traveling across the country alone. I'm a male, just for some background context to this encounter. I'd recently finished my studies and was taking some time out for myself. I'd always wanted to explore different parts of the country, so dedicated the summer to myself, to travel up and down the country and ticking some places I'd always wanted to visit off of my list. I had enough money to see me travel, money for food, drink and accommodation, and by that I mean cheap motels where I could get my head down, but not cost me too much. At the time I didn't have a car, so most of my traveling was done from buses, walking the odd few miles whilst hitching for a ride. And that's where I found myself when I just finished up in Utah. I was walking along as I looked to hitch a ride. I was looking to make my way to California, with a long list of places I wanted to explore there. I wasn't having much luck with getting a ride, with the majority of cars just passing me by. The more I walked, the later it was getting, before it was pretty much nightfall. Knowing if nobody stopped, I would have to walk until I found the next town or closest motel to get my head down, and try again the next day, with cars becoming fewer and further between. But as I was thinking this, I could see some more headlights coming down in the distance, as I tried my luck again. And to my excitement, the vehicle began to slow as it slowly went past me, coming to a stop. As I jogged over to the grey Ford truck, I made my way round to the passenger's side door. As I grabbed the handle, the door was locked. I couldn't get in. It was then the window slowly came down halfway. I couldn't fully see inside, but I heard the guy ask where I was heading in a friendly tone, telling him where I was looking to go and asking if he was heading in that direction. If he could take me as far as he was heading, I'd be grateful for the ride. Again, hearing the guy, he told me that was no problem and to jump in. The window then began to close. I heard the door lock unclick as I grabbed the handle and opened the door. As soon as I got in, the man took off as he drove down the road. I thanked him for giving me a ride. As I looked around and over to him, he was a middle-aged white male. His hood was up and he didn't look directly at me so I could see his full face. As we drove along, I tried to make conversation with him, but he wasn't the most talkative. And after our first initial interaction when I was outside of the car, his friendly demeanor had now changed. As I tried again with making conversation, he would proceed to just give one-word answers, or be very vague in his response. After numerous attempts, I found myself falling silent, as neither of us spoke. He just looked dead ahead on the road, as I sat there feeling the awkwardness wash over me, thinking to myself, hey, at least I'm not walking. The journey would hopefully be quick. Not really knowing what to do with myself, I just sat there in silence. As I started to look around, it was then the man spoke, and what he said confused me.
"I can't do it again,"
he had said aloud. Even though I heard it, I asked him what he had said as I didn't understand what he meant by that. The man didn't reply. He didn't even look at me, he just kept his eyes on the road. I was now beginning to feel uncomfortable around this guy. Another awkward few minutes of silence passed before the man again spoke aloud, this time saying forcefully,
"I won't."
Weirded out, I asked, was everything okay? Won't what? Was he talking to me? What he was saying didn't make sense. It was then the man gritted his teeth as he began to sob angrily.
"He wants me to do it again, but I can't,"
he said. The uncomfortable feeling I had now turned into fear, as I regretted my decision to get a ride from this guy. He clearly had issues. We wanted him to do what? What the hell was he talking about? It was only us in the car. It was then he turned off the side of the road we were on and headed down a dirt track that appeared ahead, breaking off the main stretch of road. My pulse began to race as I asked where he was going. Why had he turned off? Wanting nothing more than to get out of the car, it was then the guy pulled over, coming to a stop as he turned and looked at me. As I grabbed at the handle, I heard the doors lock. My heart was racing as I said, "Look, please just let me out. I don't want any trouble. I'd like to walk, thank you." The man glared at me as he said those same words.
"He wants me to do it, but I won't do it again."
Hearing the inner turmoil in his voice terrified me. What the fuck was he on about? Looking me dead in the eyes, the man then said, "You have one chance. Get out now and run." I could feel my nerves shaking as the man said this. I feared for my life, and at the moment the car doors unlocked, and without hesitation, I pushed open the door as fast as I could, falling to the ground beneath me, as I scrambled to my feet and began to run to distance myself as far away from that man as I could. Unable to help myself, looking back I saw him shouting to himself in the car as he turned the car around and drove off. I was left a shaking mess down that dirt road, not quite understanding what just happened, but knowing deep down and feeling it in my gut that I was lucky to have gotten out of that truck. That guy was nuts. I walked an age to the next nearest town from there, and didn't even bother hitchhiking again, sticking to other means of transport. I don't know what was wrong with that guy, but he clearly wasn't all there. I don't know if it was just some sick, demented game he played to scare me, but the way he was in the truck, his presence, his eyes, I know he meant what he said, and I know deep down he had some dark things. I do believe he was talking to himself, and contemplating doing something horrific to me. I reported what I could to the police, feeling it was only right, as that guy would have been a danger to others out there, like me just looking for a ride. But I couldn't give that much information, only a description of his truck and what he looked like. I didn't get his license plate. Since that night, hitchhiking was a no-go for me, and all these years later, I still remember that night often. I often think, where out there is that guy now? Or what he could have done since that night? Was I in the presence of evil that night? I consider myself lucky that I never found out. I was driving home from working out of town when this experience happened to me. I'd been on the road for hours and still had a ways of my journey to go. I wasn't due back until late that evening. I was driving down a long stretch of road when I saw up ahead someone walking on the side of the road. Slowing, I could see they were facing me as they signaled look for me to stop. The man was alone and there was no other vehicle in sight, so wondering what he was doing out here walking the side of the road, I stopped. I wound the window down, checking if he was okay. He was, I would say, looking to be in his mid-30s and of Latino descent. A smile plastered itself across his face, seemingly happy I'd stopped. He asked me if he could trouble me for a ride as he was stranded and could really use the help. Looking at this guy, he seemed genuine, so not thinking twice, I said I would give him a ride. As he jumped in, he thanked me and seemed genuinely happy that I'd stopped and that I'd given him a ride. Hey, I'd been driving for hours, so I thought I could use some company anyway, someone to talk to. As we discussed where he was heading, it seemed it would be on my way to where I was heading, so it wasn't any problem. As we drove, we chatted, and the man was friendly enough. He said his name was Dominic and that he'd been hitchhiking for hours before I'd finally stopped and helped him out. He'd fallen out with his partner, who had drove off without him, leaving him stranded. I thought to myself, obviously not knowing the full context, that it was a pretty shitty thing to do. After discussing him, Dominic began to ask where I was coming from, where I was heading, and what I did for a living, amongst other things. As I was answering, I noticed Dominic was disengaged, not really listening to what I was saying, and was more concentrated on looking out the rear view and side mirror. I jokingly asked if he was looking for something, but as I asked, he just looked at me and laughed. Strange, I thought to myself. It was then his phone began to ring as he answered. He began talking in Spanish, something I wasn't very well versed in, so I couldn't understand what he was saying. But as he continued to talk, he kept looking at me as he smiled. I began to feel uncomfortable as I got the impression that he was talking about me. I couldn't be sure, but it seemed that way. He continued in his own language as he laughed. For someone who had just been left stranded by their partner after an argument, he sure did seem in good spirits. I continued to drive as I fell silent, listening in on his conversation. I couldn't understand as he continued to stare at me, making me feel uncomfortable. It was then he said something that I understood. He mentioned the make of my car to whoever was on the phone, before hanging up. Why had he mentioned the make of the car I was driving? The car then fell silent, as he looked out the window, then back down at his phone. Something didn't seem quite normal about this guy now. I asked him if everything was alright, to which he replied yes. He was just talking to a friend, as he then began to speak aloud in his own language again. It was then I said, "English if you can please," and that I didn't speak Spanish. He looked at me and then proceeded to laugh as he apologized. He was just thinking out loud. His eyes then moved back to the mirror. What was he looking for? In that moment, as I looked up in the rearview mirror, it was then I saw a set of headlights turn on and head onto the road behind us. As soon as that happened, Dominic looked at his phone and said where I was dropping him off was coming up soon, and he directed me where to turn off a few miles or so up ahead. We were nowhere near where he had originally said he wanted to be dropped. I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling building in my gut, as I knew something wasn't right. The car behind was pretty much tailgating us now. As I drove and my thoughts raced, I noticed Dominic, who was trying not to make it obvious, glance in the mirror at the car behind before looking back at me. Not knowing what to do, I said, "So where was it you needed dropping?" He calmly replied, "Just a little way up." And at that point, with the car behind and his strange behavior, I knew to trust my gut something was not right. I saw a gas station up ahead and knew that was my best and only option to try and get myself out of this situation I found myself in. The car was definitely following us. I didn't want to make it too obvious, so waiting until the last second, I quickly turned off towards the gas station. The guy's face changed suddenly as he began speaking in his own language again, before angrily asking me what I was doing and where I was going. I said I needed to get gas before we went any further. He seemed pissed as he told me I didn't and to get back onto the road. I told him it was okay, he could wait in the car, I would only be a second. Then my heart began to race as he began to rummage in his pocket as if looking for something. I knew this wasn't a good sign. Finally, in the view of public, I came to an abrupt stop, turned off the car and jumped out. It was then the hitchhiker got out of the car, glaring at me angrily as he hurled words towards me that I couldn't understand. I quickly made my way to the doors of the station, as to be in sight of people. It was then the car that tailgated us pulled up behind my car, as the hitchhiker quickly jumped in before the car sped away. My pulse was racing, I was shaking from adrenaline. I knew something was up and that the hitchhiker had lied to me and was baiting me into a dangerous situation. I don't know where he was leading me, or what him and the car following us his true intentions were, but I know it wasn't good, and I'm so glad that I trusted my gut and turned off to a public area. I waited at the gas station for a while and informed the staff of what I believed happened before leaving when I felt safe to do so. After that night, I've never stopped to pick up another hitchhiker. I consider myself lucky nothing happened to me that night. I was so lucky there was a gas station we passed. I don't know what would have happened if there wasn't. So, learning my lesson, I don't want to ever put myself in a situation like that again. Thank you for joining us and watching this chilling video. We hope you enjoyed this topic and you found the fear within. What other subjects would you like to hear soon? Let us know in the comments what creeps you out. If you're new here, say hello. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Become a part of the Horror Motives world. See you soon with another terrifying video.